Hi everybody, I wanted to talk to you today about the 3 biggest misconceptions I see people have as they come into my office about estate planning and probate. But before I dive into that, I wanted to let you know how to reach out to me. You can find me in my email, Derek, D-E-R-E-K, at legionlawpllc.com, or you can find me on my website, www.legionlawpllc.com. So with that, let's dive into the biggest mistakes that people have in their minds about estate planning. And I mean that to be nice. To be frank, it's completely understandable that people are not thinking about estate planning very often. I got my notes here and I want to make sure I got it right. And the very first one is that the wife or the spouse will receive and be able to do anything they want in an emergency. So that is just false. It is wrong. It is not true whatsoever. In Texas, if you do not have an estate plan in place, and again, estate plan addresses if you're in a coma, if you can't pay your bills, if you die, what happens to your assets, all sorts of things. Again, so if any of these situations pop up, there are default laws in Texas that say if you do not have an estate plan that addresses this situation, we must adhere to these laws. And in some circumstances, a spouse will not receive everything. They will not be able to make medical decisions on your behalf, other things like that. It really depends on the circumstance, but if you're remarried and you have children with different people than your current spouse, that is a situation where oftentimes a spouse will not receive everything. Or if you have everything in your name and you excluded your spouse on the actual asset, the spouse cannot access that asset after you pass away. And this happens very frequently where a man is a breadwinner, a woman is the homemaker, and the man passes away and the woman cannot access the millions the man has saved up in retirements. She's a millionaire and she is dirt poor because she can't access those accounts under those circumstances because they didn't have an estate plan in place. So if they had an estate plan, it would say, all right, once the person passes away, it transfers directly over to the wife immediately, et cetera, et cetera. So please don't make that assumption. Your spouse cannot make all decisions all the time. Possibly, it could happen, but it also could not happen. And that is a very, very tough conversation to have. And that's regardless if you've been married for 30 plus years, you love each other to death, you agree that you can do everything together, doesn't matter. Those default laws will be rigidly applied and they do not care, even if your spouse is the greatest spouse on earth, which congratulations if you have one, by the way. I would argue I have one personally, but that's just me. The second misconception, let's check my notes. We have the trusts are not for me. Now, I talked about this in another video, and it turns out that trusts are actually quite applicable for most people. I would argue that if you're a classic American family, you have a car or a couple cars, you have a retirement account, a house, bank accounts, stuff like that, a trust is very appropriate. And in fact, you're going to strongly want to look at a revocable living trust because you will have to go through probate, most likely. And probate is going to cost quite a bit of money. Probate, again, is the process by which a judge says, this is who's in charge of splitting up a deceased person's estate, and this is how we're going to split everything up. Now, again, sounds super easy and quick, but actually it takes about 4 months, $5,000 on average if you have a will. It'll take $7,000 and 6 months if you don't have a will to go through that probate process. Now again, if you have a trust, you can avoid that entirely, and that's going to apply to everybody who has $100,000 to their name, $1 million, $10 million, whatever. You can avoid probate, and you should, because this is going to be more expensive than a trust. Probate's more expensive than a trust on average, and it's such a headache. It causes your children a lot of grief to have to go through all that. So again, I strongly recommend, and you can check this out in my other videos, but if you are above $75,000 of assets to your name, you should strongly consider a trust, because usually setting up a trust is going to be cheaper than going through probate if you have more than $75,000 to your name, or if you own real estate, and especially if you own real estate in multiple states or multiple counties, but that's neither here nor there. So a trust is actually appropriate for way more people than they think it is. And again, it's not just for the super rich, it is for the standard mom and pop, classic American family. The third one would be that there is no need for probate after you pass away. Now, this is another one that I run into often. I am the only child. My dad's already passed away. My mom is the last one alive, so she's passing away. Why can't I just receive the house? It's the childhood house. There's nobody else, and I have no siblings. It's just from mom to son, right? What's wrong with that? And in the eyes of Texas, everything is wrong with that, because title companies, real estate brokers, mortgage companies, they will not touch a deal until you have approval from a judge. And the only way you can get approval from a judge is through probate, or by having that trust that I mentioned earlier. Well, you won't get approval from a judge, but you'll avoid probate. So either way, what I'm trying to say is that more often than not, even if you have a wonderful relationship and everything's perfect and everybody gets along and it seems very straightforward, one person should receive everything, even those best case scenarios will go through probate more often than not. And again, it will cost a lot, it'll be very painful, difficult to go through, and it's not fun. So please don't assume that you will avoid probate because you're just a small little family who doesn't do anything wrong. You're most likely going to have to go through probate to transfer assets from one generation to the other, and so much more. So either way, I mean, I could speak on this for hours. I'm not going to, but those are the three biggest misconceptions I run into, among many others. And again, you want to just double check with an attorney. Just see where the landmines are at. See if there are any landmines, because again, you just don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know what's going to happen, some pretty bad things could happen. So with that, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Again, my email is Derek, D-E-R-E-K, at legionlawpllc.com, or you can find me on my website, where you can go to our Contact Us page and schedule a free consultation directly onto my calendar. Again, that's www.legionlawpllc.com. So thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.